So recently, I've been feeling really weird. After, I think, post COVID is when I realized that this is happening to me. I was randomly, I would every month I would feel like my menstrual cycle has gone completely bonkers. Post COVID, post I've had it once, post the vaccines, post everything, and I've been asking everyone. I'm like, is it happening to you too, or is it just me? Is it just a me problem? Today I thought, why not invite somebody over who can actually explain this to me? Because clearly, I mean, this is what this podcast is all about, right? Me calling people over and helping me explain what's going on with life. So let's talk about this and a bunch of other things relating to women's sexual health and reproductive health, essentially. So today we have with us Madiha.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Madiha Latif, and I've been working with Pathfinder International Pakistan since 2019.
Wow.
But prior to that, also working, with an organization that primarily focused on women's health and reproductive and sexual agency, and how that intersects with our actual day-to-day lives and the ability to live healthy, happy, and lives we want.
We take that for granted, right? The live happy, healthy, content, all of those things, we normally take them for granted.
Well, they don't really always exist either, right? Happiness is a spectrum.
Absolutely, absolutely. But like little things like women's health or just generally health, we take it for granted, especially here in this country where people don't go to the doctor or don't go and get things seen to unless they're literally in a really bad state where they can't move on or they can't go on. That's usually, that's me. I usually don't avoid the doctor as much as possible until I can't take it anymore. So, how did you get into all of this? Let's talk a little bit about your career and your, getting into all of this. How did you?
Well, first, I wanted to say that I don't necessarily think we take our health for granted, but rather I don't think we prioritize it in the way that we should. I mean, taking one thing for granted is expecting that we'll always be healthy, but, generally and based on whatever, data or evidence or work that we have been doing, we know primarily that women suffer from health issues, and it's just everyone else takes priority,
right,
but themselves. And I
that's a very women in this side of, I'd say South Asia to give it a more general thing.
Yeah,
but
it's a cultural problem.
Yeah, it's a cultural
sure.
problem. That's true.
So I say that because I think I've also done the same for myself. I've had 2 kids, and each time I had my first one, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take my maternity leave and I'll do 3 months aram se. And I had my second one and I was like, oh, my 3 months were so easy last time. I'm not going to do the same. I kind of want to get back to work. I want to interact with adults and I want to do this and I want to do that. And it was, again, it's just that everything else was more important than taking time out for myself.
Right.
And I think, it's important to know that we do this to ourselves a lot as well.
Right.
But I started off this work, actually, wow, I feel old.
Don't worry, we're all in the same boat. Every time someone asks me, how long have you been doing this? And I'm like, 10 years. It's a decade of my life.
Yeah.
And it's flown by so quick.
Yeah, but it's not enough in our sector sometimes to say I've worked for 10 years. People look at me and still think, sometimes that I'm too young. But
that's a good thing, right?
Always a great thing. Thank you for good genes, Dad, and Mom. But where I started was actually at a very, very different organization. We used to do work on digital rights. It was a small organization that was run by these 2 incredible powerhouses, Fariha Aziz and Sana Salim. We had incredible mentors like Jahanara from, Catalyst Labs now.
Yeah.
And currently, I know Usama Khilji is, taking the torch forward with Bolo P. So recognizing all of the incredible people that I've interacted with. But I started doing work on digital rights. I have a legal background, so it made sense.
Yeah.
And while I was working, an issue was brought up to us from from Women's Action Forum, which is WAF. WAF is the National Feminist Movement. And it was particularly on acid crime. And they had come to us talking about, the complexities with dealing with acid crime survivors and some of the services that we're receiving at the health facilities. Civil ward hai, civil hospital hai, Jinnah ka burn center hai, and that's where generally the survivors were taken. And some of the things that they were telling us about the interactions that those survivors had with the nurses and the support staff, it was heartbreaking. Like these are 12-year-old, 13-year-old girls who've been doused with acid. Their lives essentially changed overnight because they stood up to say no to a rishta or, stand up for anything about themselves. Yeah. And the men thought that the response to that was to throw acid on them. And, one of them told me, and I remember it so clearly, that she said that when he did that, he said to me, "Tum meri nahi ho sakti, to kisi ki nahi ho sakti." And through that. And, I spent almost a year supporting her through her survivor journey. And one of the things that I learned while I was doing all of that was that our health systems, there's no room for compassion and empathy. There's no room for, the human aspect of treating a patient or having any form of patient-centered or survivor-centered care. And that's how I got involved in this work. It started off with a completely different trajectory.
No, but it's a really cool journey to get to that point. It's something that's very important. So like you were saying, the compassion element is missing with our health services, 110%. I've spoken to people who've had very specific type of health issues, not health, but like gunshot victims or even acid victims, and the only hospitals that take them are the public hospitals. It's sort of like there's something
a legal mandate
there's
or
a
something
thing
of that sort.
And the government hospitals see so many people on a daily basis that I feel like at some point they've just become numb to it all, or they never had compassion to begin with because they're seeing so many cases, and it's just there's just so much that they're overwhelmed that they just block it all out and they go on with their day. But what they don't realize is that human element of when you're hurting and you need somebody to just hold your hand and be like, it's going to be okay. That's missing in a lot of aspects in Pakistan, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think it's not just the public hospitals. My sister used to run this Facebook group, and usme bhi, so many times, women would talk about some of the ways that the professionals in private hospitals would respond to them or gaslight them. And if you read some of, cases or experiences of women from across the globe, there is this sense that women's health is more in her head than it is. Women's health issues are more in their head. I'll tell you a very interesting thing, which I learned very recently. When you breastfeed a child, there is a process called a letdown, right? And that process of a letdown actually is ignited through hormones, right? I'm not a medical doctor, by the way, just FYI. I'm a public policy specialist.
But you have so much experience that you can speak about these things.
For some things. Yeah. I will not pretend to be a doctor. But there's a letdown that happens, and when the child is attached to you, there's a latch position, which midwives will tell you that it's not very simple. You actually have to practice and learn. Right. Breastfeeding is hard.
I've heard from all of my friends who've gone through it that it's not as easy as you just put a baby's face there and it happens.
And it's not like the most natural thing in the world.
And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
But what I learned was, interestingly enough, was that there are some women who experience melancholy when they have a letdown. And these women were talking about how when they start nursing and the rush comes through, it's a rush of sadness. And they literally feel in those moments that all hope is lost, or they feel despair. And I was really taken aback by that.
Wow.
Because normally when you talk about breastfeeding, there's so many other, women or whoever who experience a different form of elation or relief, or it's some form of happiness. And breastfeeding is always, everyone's always sad when the journey comes to end and whatever. I breastfed my first child for 2 years, and I was not sad when the journey came to an end. I can promise you, I am also not going to be sad when this one comes to an end. But the fact that we put, or we box, these issues into, okay, you can either feel like this or you can either feel like that, and you don't give space for other feelings.
The books, I feel like I would probably, if and when I have kids, I probably wouldn't go with the books, because I also acknowledge the fact that every single person's body is different. Everyone's experience is different. Everyone experiences things differently. But what's important is talking about it. Right? If you're telling me this, I'm actually learning something new today because we're talking about it. Similarly, we always encourage other people to go out and talk about their experiences as much as possible. On this podcast, a couple of episodes ago, I had some of my friends come in who are mums, and one of them spoke about her postpartum journey and how she got gaslit by one of the top doctors in the city.
I'm not surprised.
And she was actually, it kind of shocked her out of whatever she was going through, because she was like, I can't believe this guy is sitting here telling me that it's in my head, or maybe it's something that, my husband said something to me, or my family. Like, he came up with every other excuse apart from the fact that I genuinely have a postpartum problem. So these kind of things shock me when people tell me these things, because I'm just like, I can't believe that we have to go through all of this on top of everything else that we're going through.
And we do lack a supportive environment, whether we talk about it at home, whether we talk about it even in relatability with people who don't have kids, or or different experiences. And I think it's important to note that everyone's not a tick box solution, and everything is not a tick box solution, and things need to be taken in context and in environment. Everyone's health is different too, right? Health levels are different.
Absolutely.
Lifestyles are different, and how that impacts how you are, and how you are mentally, physically, emotionally. They all sort of culminate into how we show up and how our bodies respond to us.
Right.
You were talking about menstruation and post-COVID. And there has been a lot of conversation on this, that there's been some hormonal disbalances.
So I've heard both sides. I've heard the side where the people who completely just push it aside, and they're just like, no, it's just in your head. And I'm like, no, it's literally, I know my body. I started with my cycle when I was 9-10 years old. I started fairly early. So, for 2-3 decades, I know my body. I know what my cycle was like. I know exactly what was going on with me. And now it's different. It's very obviously different, and I can feel it. And then there's the other end of the spectrum that they're saying, it's probably the vaccine. So I guess
there's not a lot of research to pinpoint whether it's the vaccine or not. There are other factors that influence this.
Right.
Age is one of them. Any change in lifestyle is another. We also go post 30s, as we're entering 40s, and sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later too. Everyone is different when they start, but perimenopause is a real thing. And, we always talk about menopause.
Right.
But we don't talk about, and this is my real contention with life, is that the youth ki jo category hai na, everywhere is 15 to 29. The minute you turn 30, you're no longer a youth, but you're also not old enough to be considered in the older category.
In no man's land.
Between the 30s and the 45s, people sort of miss out on us. And I think the miss out is also in the conversation, right?
Right, yeah.
And post 30s, the potential of you going into a perimenopausal state is high. And, it has to do with your sleep. It has to do with your food. It has to do with, by the way, weather. Climate change is really impacting our schedules and our processes and our cycles. Heat impacts women differently.
Oh my God. Me? The other day, I thought I was having a panic attack or something. No, it was just really hot where I was. I felt like I was in a sauna, but I didn't even think about it, because I'm like, no, I'm okay with this summer heat, but oh my God, it's been horrible the last couple of
So normally
weeks.
I don't even sweat. Like there used to be a running joke with my husband and I that, you know, Karachi mein jitni garmi ho jaye, Madiha doesn't sweat.
Yeah.
And he sweats a lot. Like he changes like 7 or 8 shirts a day. It's disgusting. Sorry, you know, but it is.
Poor chap. I feel
I love
his pain.
him.
I
I
feel
love
his
him.
pain. I've been taking like 4 showers a day because I just can't take it.
But what I realized that after I had my second child,
Yeah.
I could not deal with the heat. And yesterday I was sitting and I was taking a call outside my little space. I was working from home yesterday.
Yeah.
And my younger one was sleeping, so I didn't give him some quiet. I moved out of the room. I didn't turn on the AC, and in fact, I didn't even turn on the fan. Big mistake. I was sitting on this really important call, and I was just sweating.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this has never happened to me. And, you know, you realize your female body especially, they continue to change and they continue to adapt or rather, you know, react to the environment that they're in.
Right.
It's fascinating, actually, the female body and the way we work. I'm not saying that, you know,
I mean,
we're special, but
I absolutely agree with you because there's just so much
But we are special.
happening. Of course we're special.
Yeah.
I mean, in comparison, what do they have? Sweat. That's all they got at this point in time. And muscle, whatever.
they also get muscle faster than we do.
Yeah, they do. Fine, they can have that. We have 100 other, but we have a whole bucket of issues that we're juggling, and we talk about.
And we
this.
also need more fat than they do. Do you know that?
No.
Yeah. I'm not going to pretend to know all the science behind it. Oops.
No, it's
but
fine.
generally, women require more bodily fat. They require more carb consumption as well than men.
Oh, so it's okay for me to keep pounding those carbs?
Okay. As long as you go for some checkups later to make sure all cholesterol and everything is all good, you're fine.
That's not happening anytime soon. I'm just one of those.
See, you have to
escapists.
take our
Yeah, I
time to
know.
do these
I have
annual
to.
checkups.
We need to
I mean,
prioritize. I know.
one of the things I was reading recently as well, part of the job also is to understand, you know, emergence and patterns of new problems for women and girls. And one of the things that keep creeping up is breast cancer, actually. You know, some self-examinations to karte nahi hai. No one has ever taught us how to do a self-examination. So encouraging everybody to watch some self-examination
easy.
videos.
There's
Absolutely.
YouTube. You have access to all kinds of videos on YouTube. People should actually actively go and check them out.
But
and
we also should be going for mammograms, and we should be utilizing services that are. It's privileged to say that, yeah, because like we can afford to get up and go get some mammograms done, and you know, rural Pakistan is abstract poverty, the multidimensional poverty, which means that, you know, they don't have access to proper healthcare services, education, economic opportunities, and all of that. Just to live a decent lifestyle. But if you have the privilege, like, utilize it for yourself as well a little bit, you know, go get those mammograms, go get those checkups. We should be getting pap smears at our ages now, you know.
My cousin told me this recently. She was like, you know, you are at that age now that you should get like annual checkups, get like this done. She's like, I'm doing it. And she lives abroad.
Yeah.
And she's like, look, my company mandates me to do it.
Yeah.
In Pakistan, I understand that nobody mandates you to do anything. And even if the company does mandate you, you will try and find a loophole around it and not go to avoid it just for the sake of avoiding it. But what you don't realize is that it's there for a reason.
Yeah.
It's
हमारा मसला
important.
ये है ना कि इतना टाइम लग जाता है hospitals पे, like, you know, you think about having to take a day off, and then sometimes you got to meet somebody and no one follows a schedule.
Yeah.
In the US and in general, you know, the more evolved health systems, there is schedules or times, you know, things happen at a process. Turkey is a great example of that. But in Pakistan, it's a little bit of a struggle. And
Everything is a little bit of a struggle.
It's because our health systems at the private level, they're overburdened. I mean, you know, Hamari Awam, our population is rapidly increasing. I think the last census was 2.55% on a yearly basis that was agreed upon. And our systems are not equipped to kind of handle the amount of peoples, and which is why the COVID response actually was excellent from Pakistan, is like it took into account all of these different aspects.
Right.
But I mean, you know, I know women our age and who are married and don't want to have kids, but don't want to use family planning either. And one of the reasons I think is, you know, they don't get proper counseling on it.
So this, I really want to dive a little deeper into this, because I feel like this is something that is never really discussed ever. And the amount of times that I have on these Facebook groups read women actually asking very important questions about their sexual health, about them married, non-married, all of that, and they feel comfortable to talk about it on these women specific groups that are closed groups, which I think is brilliant. I think it's one of the most important things that has come out in the last so many years, because they have a platform that they can actually talk and they can get some good advice. Yeah, of course, there's trolls everywhere, and there's all kinds of people out there who would much rather push you down for asking a simple question. But also there are a lot more who are empathetic and who actually give great advice. But again, they're not all doctors. They're not all, and the women on that group would much rather ask on that group rather than actually go see a proper health expert.
Yeah, that is an area that, you know, my organization, which is Pathfinder, we do work on. We work very, very closely with the public sector, government to, you know, enhance the kind of counseling, information, advice that, you know, our doctors, our professionals, are doling out to patients.
But do you think that there's still a barrier? Like, do you think it's still difficult for people to open up and come to you, approach you?
I mean, we don't provide these services.
Right.
We don't directly provide any services.
But
we support the systems that provide these services.
Okay.
And, one of the ways is to teach them empathetic counseling, break down the personal or implicit biases that we have that stop a professional from, acting or providing comprehensive services to women and girls. But it's a larger problem than that, I hate to say it like this, and people will always turn around and say that everything is the state's fault, but everything is not the state's fault.
No.
And there has to be some ownership, some reflection on how we contribute to the problem.
I absolutely agree.
For the larger part of it, yes, the state is responsible to provide services, and the state should be creating more investments and more pathways for investments in our health systems to improve the human resource problem, data management problems, all of that. Yes, absolutely. But what about all of us who are sitting here in these privileged places, have the socioeconomic bandwidth to go out and meet doctors and do all of that? What is stopping us from getting, and who have access to the internet?
You're absolutely right.
What is stopping us from looking at things from a holistic perspective and saying that, okay, I should take responsibility for my body, and I should take responsibility for X, Y, and Z, and, also find information for myself. Again, private facilities also tend to gaslight women. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that our private facilities are providing like top-notch services, but they're an overburdened system as well.
Right.
Have you ever been to a waiting room to go see a gynecologist?
Yes. So many times.
Yeah. How many patients do you think a doctor is able to adequately see?
And also be empathetic and be sympathetic to each and every one of them. It's impossible. Because they're also human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say. We need to start humanizing all of these problems, because there are a lot. Yeah. And they are a vast majority of it. But we also use a lot of word-to-mouth references when it comes to medical stuff, which is a little bit dangerous. Yeah. I mean,
I feel like even on this group, a couple of things that I've read, I'm like, no, please don't listen to the rest of the people giving you advice. There's like 2,000 comments on a post where this person is genuinely asking for medical advice, and I'm like, no, please go see a doctor. Like that's the only thing that everyone should be saying. Yeah. And the few women that do say it, their comment just gets pushed aside. Yeah. So people do also need to, if you are online and if you are asking these questions online or searching for some kind of answer online, then clearly you do have, clearly there's a problem. But you do have the capacity to go out and seek an expert as well.
The reason why I bring that up is because there's telehealth counseling now. You don't actually, for us, we don't actually have to leave our homes to always get counseling or always get, some form of advice. But it's important for us to, like, when we come back to like issues like family planning, is also like unlearn a lot of our own biases and our own thought processes. What our mothers went through with family planning, or our grandmothers went through with family planning, there has been generational change and advancements in science that has also been incorporated in our family planning methodology. There is a lot to be done. Again, a lot to be done.
Family planning, and also something as simple as back in the day, my grandmother's like, oh yeah, we never use these kind of pads that you guys use these days. It's so easy for you. We had to make our own. And I'm like, where did you live? I can't even imagine that. And now for us, all of these things come so easy. Even family planning comes very easy. And it's very easy to have access to a doctor to go and talk about these things. Back then, taboo, it was a much bigger taboo.
Yeah. But there's also we have to take into account, I know I'm like contradicting myself a little bit, but when you do go to a doctor and you do talk about family planning, right? Well, aapko list of options is it then. This you can do, this you can do. This I don't think you should do if you haven't had a child, da-da-da-da-da. All that information is not always 100% accurate. You can have an IUCD even if you don't have a child.
And who's giving them this list? Like they made it up themselves and it's just
this is a
shared
list of
across.
what is available in Pakistan.
Is there a policy to use that list and give it across, or is it like, where is it coming from? Or is it just every doctor has a list?
It would depend on where you're going and what methods are available, right? We don't have a basket of choices available in Pakistan, which is one thing that the government is working towards. But in general, what I mean to say is that they know there's a standard list. We have oral contraception pills, we have IUCDs, we have implants, we have injectables. What our doctors don't do is ask for our medical history. Or understand what our medical history needs, medical history looks like, to understand or advise us according to those needs.
Right, because...
what I mean to say is with the OCP, for instance, not everyone is eligible for an OCP.
Right.
If you have history of blood clots, for instance, if you have any other kind of medical issue that could, negate the impact of the OCP, you should not be taking it. But I don't remember when I went in ever being asked to get a blood test done, ever being asked to give my medical history. 2-3 सवाल पूछे थे, and they were like, okay, cool, take it. I ended up with blood clots.
Oh my God.
It was detected by somebody else, and it came about because, again, I was just getting these series of migraines that I've never experienced. I've never had a migraine. I could not understand it. And I was on that pill for like 2.5 years or something. And obviously, it was like, this is the only medication I take. Every time I went to a doctor, I was like, this is the only medication I take. Never ever chalked it up to that. But it turned out that the minute I stopped the OCP, the migraines were gone, the blood clots were gone. So these are real issues.
A lot of women, even if you are super educated in the field, you will not know until you are not a doctor, or until you are not actually do the research, or you go through it, or you experience it, and then you tell your friends about it. And then I learned a lot of things through my friends.
That's where I get nervous, right? Because like my experience is not the same as a third woman. There are women all over the world that use OCP successfully, without any issues.
But everyone's body is different. And how your body reacts to certain things is also different. That I know someone who tried a bunch of different options that did not suit her at all, until she actually landed on one that suited her. But she had to go through that trial and error, and it was a whole year of torture.
And that's what I mean by there's a lot to be done to improve the process for women to even uptake family planning and to even be considering those choices.
And the community doesn't help. The community, I feel, makes it a little bit more difficult because they don't talk about anything. I mean, when was the last time our mums ever sat us down and gave us like any of this information? I don't remember. And the same goes for a lot of my friends. Like, we have these conversations amongst us as friends now, but I don't know anyone else from any different other. I know lots of girls over here at work. Sometimes if we're just the girls sitting together and somebody will bring up something. Somebody got married recently, so we brought up something, and some of the younger girls have never had these conversations, and they were completely clueless until we had these conversations with them. They could have gone through life without having them at all, and then gotten married, and then gone through all of this, and then been tortured for years and years, and not understanding what's going on with their body.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, an organization, and a few of us, like a few of our organizations, we tried to, push through what we call the life skills building education, which is based on the evidence that suggests that comprehensive sexuality education is really important in order for us to negotiate even our bodily rights, right? There's some incredible evidence that comes out from Africa. Of course, not very big scale, but enough to suggest that there is something to it.
Right.
Is that when you talk to a girl about menstruation and teaching her at a young age what menstruation means, how you should handle it, and that it's not something to be ashamed of, nor does it make you or makes you weaker. It has improved sexual negotiations in Africa, where teenage pregnancies were really high.
Yeah.
What it was pushing these women to do is, embrace their bodies, embrace themselves, and not feel as though, they had to engage in any kind of sexual activity if they weren't ready for it.
Right.
Which I thought was really interesting. It ties down to your power dynamics. Like your body is connected to the power that you feel, and then the ability to negotiate, for yourself or for your rights. And that's what we keep talking about, that healthy women, healthy families will lead to stronger communities.
Right.
And it starts with us from our homes, our houses, our communities. And creating supportive environments is essential. And our men have a big role to play in this as well with our women, supporting them. Also, I think sometimes our men gaslight us, right? Like, कि हाँ, इसके तो सर में दर्द होता ही है. Or like, every woman menstruates, or every woman gets pregnant, and every woman gives birth. And how hard could it be?
I'd like to see them go through even one of the things that we go through and then manage the rest of their day. Just one thing. I'm not saying give them our entire bucket of things that we
I don't wish that on anybody. Yeah.
But like, I honestly, I would just want them, like, the next time a guy comes up to us and says, so what? You can go through it. I know some of my friends used to go through it and they were fine. No, that it's different for each and every person, and we understand that it's different, but even some of the women don't understand that it's different.
I was gonna say we also contribute to it, right? But for instance, my sisters used to have difficult periods, and I didn't ever have a difficult, so I never understood.
Right.
And then you learn and you unlearn, and then you recognize that yes, everybody is different. Everyone has different set of struggles. And everybody's bodies react differently to different things.
Yeah.
So, just again, like, I think we just need to stop putting everything in a box and putting everything in a category.
This is literally my mantra on this podcast.
And just
don't put a label on everything. Don't put everything
conversations.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I wanted to actually ask, when you mentioned how they did the study in Africa, how much research is there being done here for us? Because I remember Sabah and I were actually talking about this a while ago. My co-host Sabah, who's not here today, we were talking about this, that there hasn't, South Asians, a lot of research that they do abroad in the West on everything. They put a lot of value in research, and then they base whatever outcomes come out of it based on that research. I don't feel like there's a lot that happens here. In South Asia, in Pakistan especially. Like how many research projects have been done within your space, and also specifically for women?
So contextualizing research is really important, and you're right, we do have to invest a little bit more to do those. There's some great organizations, ours included, that has done research and trying to understand different ways that things are manifesting. For instance, we did, and a lot of our work is also implementation learning and implementation research.
Right.
so we go into, situations with comprehensive knowledge.
Right.
This is a potential. But what I feel like we're very, very, and I'm very proud that we're leaning into is like using community knowledge as well. Recognizing the community knowledge has more than some value.
Right.
And these are not all just myths and culture and everything, but this knowledge stems from somewhere, and there's reason and rationale behind a lot of this knowledge. One of the projects that we're running did an incubation hub with some students, and they came up with this solution which used clay for conservation and water cooling, and that's been around forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
just
think I read
recognizing
about
that,
this.
putting value to it, and then reimagining it to provide a larger service is what we're really good at now.
Right.
And I'm really proud of my team that they've been honing in and then honoring culture, community knowledge, and local leadership.
It's important
to
because
bring
it's
this
being
stuff
passed down, right,
but
in the homes.
with research, where I was going with that is that we borrow a lot of our ideas from the West, and
Right.
a big narrative now is decolonizing health. And what decolonizing also is needing to reflect on is that women's bodies, even based on your geographic locations,
Right.
are also very different.
Yes.
So what works in the West is not going to work in South Asia or our culture, our geographic proximities
Right.
and locations. Another thing I do want to point out is a lot of this research tends to, I hate to say it, but tends to favor the men.
Always.
And a lot of these testings and all of that is done with the
male perspective.
the male biological,
Right.
makeups, as
Right.
opposed to the female biological makeups. And then there's also to put it out there is that, capacity to do research is also important, right? So what is the right sample? What is the right group? What are the right conditions? And I
Right.
think that's just something Pakistan is growing into, South Asia is generally growing into. But, that's, like I said, that's the science bits of it, right? And science is always like black and white or factual, whatever.
Yeah.
How it translates sometimes is different.
But then
But there is absolute value to testing models and practices that could
but
improve
that's where you
our
guys come
systems.
in,
Yes.
in the mix,
Yeah.
right? Like where you pick up that research and then you see how you can
Yeah.
adapt it to the community that you are serving here.
Yeah.
And essentially that's the best that this is it's a bigger if you look at the bigger picture in the long run, it's going to help
Yeah.
at somewhere down the line.
Yeah.
Do you think there's been any changes in the last, say, 10, 15 years here in Pakistan with the conversations with, because you have your ear to the ground. You also get to meet a lot of people out there, right? Having these conversations and opening up. Do you think, say since you've started this job, have you seen any changes happen? Are people more open to talking about it or coming up to you and being like, this was helpful or this wasn't helpful?
I mean, there are different pockets of it, and there are different experiences that we have. I feel like there's no one right answer to that question, strangely. It's because, when we go down in the communities and we speak to the women over there, they do want family planning, or they do want knowledge about their health.
Right.
They just have nowhere to access those services all the time. Our public health systems, they're overstretched, and there are pockets and pockets of Pakistan that don't have actual services available
Wow.
to them. We term them all as uncovered areas, but it doesn't really seem that we've been able to understand how can we make them covered areas,
Right.
And one of the things that I feel is one ways we could do that is with investing in our human resource, and recognizing that most of our workers, our frontline workers, our community workers are women, and their lived realities are really important to consider when you're investing in them as healthcare professionals. But on the other end of the spectrum, we've managed, like with the Sindh government, thanks to organizations like Zindagi Trust and Ahang, who've done incredible work in the back, trying to push for life skills based education to become integrated into the curriculum, right? Those are some wins that we've had. And we have parents who push back, or like, adults who push back.
Yeah, of course.
We would, they're not from rural Pakistan. These are your educated.
I know.
Not to say rural Pakistan's not educated, but the educated lot, who'll say, hi, you're going to talk about sex education with our kids. The idea of sex education is not to teach your kids how to have sex. It's how to be safe, how to protect your bodies, how to negotiate, how to improve your own health.
Because they're going to do it anyways.
Well, let's not say that. But let's definitely recognize that it is important to have a conversation on how to secure your bodies.
The thing is, what they
all
don't
aspects
realize is that by not talking about it, even when they are supposed to, before they're married, it's never spoken about. After they're married, it's never spoken about, but they're being told, why aren't you having kids? Why aren't you having kids? But they're not talking about the health benefits or the health, all that, the health that goes into it.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about the actual thing. They're just talking around it.
Yeah.
So eventually, it's going to affect them.
I mean, हम सब इस्लाम की बात करते हैं, right? इस्लाम में भी तो कहते हैं ना कि until 2 years, wait until you have your child 2 years. And the way Islam puts it together is through breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding is not a automatic guarantee कि आपका बच्चा नहीं होगा.
Yeah.
But for if you're exclusively breastfeeding, it can delay your period for a very long time.
Right.
However, it does not delay ovulation.
Right.
So you can get pregnant breastfeeding, which is something I find that the fact that we're still living with that myth, to me, it's incredible. Like, I cannot believe that we still believe that. I said believe too many times. But anyway, but, we talk about being followers, but then there's very clear directions that,
we are not following.
You're not following.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, the health detriments that you can have if you have children back to back, we as privileged women may not face that right now.
Right.
But 10 years, 15 years down the line, it could impact our body and our body's capacity to reform. It takes your body at least 2 years to regain the strength it had.
Right.
Post-pregnancy.
Absolutely.
And we're like, women, come back to work.
Yeah.
Women, get in the kitchen. It's like, yeah, हर किसी का बच्चा होता है ना.
Women have another child instantly.
So
my God.
I bring that up because all throughout my first pregnancy, after I had my first child, all I heard was,
so when you're having your next.
नहीं, दूसरा कर लो, एक ही साथ बड़े हो जाएंगे, जान छूट जाएगी.
Oh my God, the amount of times I've heard people say this, and I'm like, yo, she's still.
I haven't slept
in maternity
6
leave.
months. Like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
I don't want to have another one. I don't want to lose more sleep. And I say this as 2 years now have gone by and I've not slept.
Yeah.
But so excuse me if I sometimes still foggy. But this whole idea of mom brain, fogginess, all of that, those are real things. We have so many checklists going on in our head, and then having to work through all of that.
Yeah.
It's an art and skill on its own.
100%.
And this kind of advice is this kind of cultural prescriptions,
sweeping statements.
Yeah.
We are kings and queens
and I'm
of
happy
sweeping statements.
I had my second child 5 years later.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm back to no sleep and no nothing, but at least I know that my body had time to recover. It had time to rest. And I'm back at it again. And, I tied my tubes the minute they took out that child because
you were done.
I am not doing this again.
You realized for yourself that, okay, this is it. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah.
And then you made a decision for yourself.
Yeah.
But a lot of women don't.
But they don't have the agency to do that, right?
Right.
So let's be very real that women are not making full decisions about their bodies themselves. Everything seems to be a joint family decision. Whether how many kids we want to have, and that's fine. I do think you should talk to your partner very openly about how many kids you want.
Partner, yes. Why does the entire family have to get involved?
I don't know.
Culture. We're just gonna. It's a Pakistani problem.
I don't think it's
South
just a
Asian
Pakistani
problem.
That's what
No,
I'm saying.
what abroad too.
I know that, you know, there are pockets of women in the West that also have to face with a lot of, if they don't want to have kids, for instance,
Right.
when women don't want to have kids, like, they don't need anyone's permission to not have kids, but they're always going to be, there's always going to be pushback. There are always going to be comments, have the kid and you'll understand the joy. I'm also happy right now. Like, it's okay if I don't want them. And, it's okay that if I choose to live my life the way I'd like to. And, so many things just become so taboo for you do, you're damned. You don't, you're damned. Like, it's just like one of those things where it's like, kisi haal mein bhi koi khush nahi hai.
Absolutely.
So, theek hai, nahi hai na khush.
Yeah.
Just do whatever you want to do. And that was, everyone, I have 2 boys, right? So everyone was like, oh, so are you going to try for a girl? And I was very straight up. I said, no, I tied my tubes. I'm never going to have a child again. And I don't want to do that anymore. So, it is what it is. But women don't have the agency. And I think the big part of it is to start at least looping in and bringing in your spouses, your partners into these conversations from the very get-go. And not letting these things fester. And a lot of this, unfortunately, the onus lies on us to even push for that change.
Right.
And it's exhausting that we are the ones that are dealing with it, and then we're also the ones that are pushing for the change.
Right.
But I think until we also start giving space to other women to talk about these issues, to speak with them openly, with open hearts, open minds, and empathy and compassion, I don't foresee things changing in the very near future. But we're getting there. Sorry, well, I want to end on a hopeful note.
No, that's what I was going to just say. This is like an excellent place for us to kind of, I wouldn't say end this conversation, but to put a pause on it, because I do want you back, because there's so many more conversations to be had within this space that we haven't even we haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So I would love it to have you back and we kind of dig deep into certain other things, nuanced things that I feel like a lot of people would learn a lot from to have you here. So thank you so much for coming in and teaching me a bunch of things.
Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, it was very easy. Yeah, very, very, very easy. And I agree with you on everything that you've said. And more power to you guys and more power to your organization as well.
Thank you.
If you could just tell people where they can find your organization, where they can find, we'll put the details on the screen.
Sure. Yeah. We're Pathfinder International. We have our website. We're present in 12 countries, but in Pakistan, we have a full force here across the province. And, you've got our contact details on there. We'll be ready to talk whenever you are.
Very cool. Get in touch, guys, because these are important things that we should be talking about. And so thank you so much for coming here and talking to me about it. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.